Yeah, yeah. So the meeting can come to order. Welcome to the very first, not the very first, my first Sachem Legislative Forum. Can we all stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you all for attending. Many thanks to our Board of Ed trustees who are out in the audience, to Dr. Pelletieri, our superintendent, to our deputy superintendent, John O'Keefe, to Allison Florio for helping. Thank you, Allison. Of course, everyone in our amazing legislative committee, and extra appreciation to our elected officials who are here. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves because it's easier. Yeah, and for the sake of time. So we'll go from left to right.
Okay.
Right to left, my left.
Hello.
Left.
My name is Lauren Auerbach. I work for legislator Nick Caracappa, who is unable to be here tonight and sends his regrets. He represents the 4th Legislative District, which includes Selden, Centereach, Farmingville, the Brookhaven portion of Ronkonkoma, and small parts of Holbrook, Holtzville, Port Jeff Station, and Coram. It definitely includes part of the Sachem District. And again, he sends his regrets that he's not here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Suffolk County Legislator Anthony Piccirillo, proud Sachem graduate, class of 2001. I cover Holbrook, Lake Ronkonkoma, and Holtzville. Proud to be here tonight. I'm happy for the committee to set this up, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Good to see everybody. Assemblyman Doug Smith. So happy to be here. I think the last time we did this was in 2018, pre-pandemic, way pre-pandemic. So it's good to be back. Thank you to the Legislative Committee for inviting us to be here. I represent almost the entire Sachem School District, joined by my colleagues, Assemblyman Joe DiStefano and Assemblyman Mike Fitzpatrick in the State Assembly. Will be good to be here. I'm a Sachem graduate, the ranking member of the Education Committee. Happy to be here and take your questions. Thank you.
You press the button.
Sorry. Good evening. I am representing Assemblyman Joe DiStefano in the 3rd District. He does have a small portion of Sachem School District. I am also on the Legislative Committee for Middle Country School District, so I wanted to add that this was quite an honor to be here. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Mayer. I'm here representing Supervisor of Town of Islip, Angie Carpenter. I'm the Youth Bureau Director for the Town of Islip, which basically gives services. We fund and oversee different contract agencies for the youth of Town of Islip.
Good evening. My name is John Kennedy. I'm here representing Legislator Leslie Kennedy. She is the legislator for the 12th Legislative District. That is Nesconset, parts of Centereach. She runs up a little bit into up by the South Setauket area. She has a keen interest in education and is happy to be a part of the committee. And coincidentally, your county comptroller. So you got 2 for 1. There you go, folks.
Good evening. My name is Philip Siegel. I hold the position of Legislative Chair for the Sachem PTA Council. To all in attendance, please set your cell phones to silent mode at this time. Appreciate it. I'm quickly going to go off script and just ask and even beg everyone to please join your PTA. Your support is very important. On behalf of the Sachem community, I want to thank you again to all the elected officials and representatives for attending this evening's event. I want to give them an ovation before we start. Thank you very much for coming. This legislative forum presents a fantastic opportunity for the community to obtain information from our elected officials about issues that affect Sachem and our community. questions have been submitted in advance by the community and screened by Sachem's Legislative Committee. Our elected officials will provide their responses to the questions to the best of their abilities. I'm charged with moderating this forum, and there won't be any debate or colloquy over any of the issues. To all the spectators in the audience, in attendance, just ask to remind you to kindly remain respectful and refrain from any commenting during the forum. The format will be simple. I will ask a question and then seek a response from each official. If you don't mind going first every time, I'll go my left to my right. Because we have brought officials from different levels of government together, it's unlikely that each official will have an answer to every question based on his or her jurisdiction. Therefore, if the question is outside a particular official's province, please just let me know, and we'll move on to the next individual for a response. The forum will end at 9 p.m., and so let's get started. Our first question is a broad question concerning funding. How do you plan to advocate for Sachem so that we get more funding?
I would defer to the state representative because education is on a state level.
Understood.
Yeah, well, I can't answer that question because it's not part of my jurisdiction. I would say that I speak to my assemblymen, both Doug Smith and Jared Gandolfo. I split them in the assembly through my legislative district, and we're always advocating for every school district within our legislative district for increased funding and making sure that funding is working for students and not against them. But I'll let Doug answer the broader question. Thank you.
Yeah, so good to be here. This has been a very good year for education this year and last year. And it's I just want to take a moment, too, to thank the school board members who are here. We're sitting here. I never wanted to sit at this dais, so thank you for your service. You do a great job taking a lot of the community's heat on concerns that oftentimes probably should also or exclusively be directed toward the state officials. So thank you for that. But in terms of state funding this year, we've seen record school aid. Of the state budget, $43 billion are being proposed for school assistance. In Sachem, I have the school aid runs here. As I mentioned, I'm the ranker of the education committee, so I have a lot of the education stuff here. I wanted to try to get the questions out as quick as possible. My aide, Sean, is here too. He can do some follow-up. So this year, the proposal has an increase in $2.8 million for Sachem, which is very helpful going this year. And that's on top of, I think it was $1.3 million or might have been 1.6 million for last year. And again, in addition to Sachem, I also represent almost the entire Middle Country School District. I represent Connecticut, Patrick Medford, part of Three Village, and Central Islip as well. So this is the heart of my district, but I'm also concerned about our schools here on Long Island and in my district. So we have seen increased aids, but to that question, what keeps me up at night is not what's happening this current school year, which we funded in last year's state budget on April 1st, or this coming school year, which will be funded April 1st of this year. But I am concerned about shortfalls following that. When we don't have, we received about $12 billion in federal aid over the last 2 years. I think it was about $4 billion for the pandemic assistance for education and about $8 billion through the American Rescue and Recovery Plan. So those aids specifically for education. So the state right now is a bit flush with cash at the moment, but it's one-time expenditures. So I've long advocated, and I know many of the people in this room have been very vocal about issues like universal pre-kindergarten, making sure every student, school lunches. I know that'll probably come up. That is what I'm looking toward. I'm already kind of looking, we're working on this year's budget, but we want to see what the future brings for next year. And we're going to need the help of everybody in the community on that because we can't allow it to continue to fall on the local property taxpayers. So that's a continued fight. It's been the fight for the last 10 years. I've been coming here in one capacity or another, but we'll continue advocating for that. But this year and this school year we're in right now, and the coming school year are looking pretty good for state aid.
Thank you.
No pressure.
I know, no pressure, right? I will just say that I cannot speak on behalf of Assemblyman Joe DiStefano, and I apologize for that, but I do want to assure you that we work very closely with our Assemblyman Doug Smith, and we are in constant contact and are on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, as well. I'm not able to answer this question, but I'll pass it on.
So on the behalf of the legislator, I guess I'd echo what Legislator Piccirillo and Legislator Caracappa's staff Lauren had to say. Although I will give you one item that all of the legislators are mindful of when it comes to aid coming into the school districts, and that's really throughout the whole county, and that's the functions of IDAs and the relief from tax that an applicant gets and what that does to the balance of the tax base and a revenue stream across the board. The legislators constantly looking at what those aid packages are and what the purported representation is regarding employment and some of the other things in lieu of the tax abatement they get. Because when that individual doesn't pay tax, everybody else is paying more tax. And that affects what the aid is coming in for the school district. So it is something all legislators, by and large, that I know of, are mindful of, and they view very carefully regarding what the impact is going to be with the district. I don't have anything that Doug Smith has. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question relates to education. What is your perspective on the New York State mandate regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion in the curriculum?
Okay, again, Legislator Caracappa is on the county level, but I want to make it very clear and known that prior to becoming a legislator, Nick was a member of the school board member, Middle Country, for about 10 or 15 years. Was it 15 years? For a while. So he is very supportive of education, inclusion, all of the other issues that you're going to bring up. Again, I don't want to speak for him, but I do know, as a person that was born and raised in Selden, went through the Middle Country School District himself, his children are going through it now. He's a very involved parent and was a very involved school board member. So I believe that that would be something he'd support.
Thank you.
So right now, a number of issues, because I think as somebody who was an educator in the classroom, I think that there's a lot of information and maybe some misinformation that's gone out there regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I think that there have been a lot of buzzwords out there in education, and I would really caution people to really look closely at what we're talking about. And what we're not talking about. I, as the assemblyman for the area, I get a lot of calls about concerned parents that are concerned about a topic called critical race theory. I'm sure that issue has been brought up by members of the public. So I really want to caution that, our schools are not teaching about what might be considered to some as this critical race theory piece that may pit one group against another. That's not something that is taught in our schools. But when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, what I think we are trying to do is we are trying to be sympathetic to and try to encourage diversity and encourage a lot of history. When we're talking about history, when we're talking about expanding access in, I was a mathematics teacher. We've always tried, and even when I was in college, I worked at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and I was in the Office of Educational Programs, and they continue great work with historically Black colleges and universities. So that's in partnership with Stony Brook University. At the higher education level, I'm a member of the Higher Education Committee, and we are working to try to get more people into the field of education. It's something that I think is needed, and I think that it's something where we need additional funding for. We have that additional funding in this budget, and we've been working toward it with respect to grants. But it's really a very wide issue. And I just would caution, because I think there are a lot of issues with respect to this. I'm a big supporter of social emotional learning, different than diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think that oftentimes these phrases are really thrown out and maybe used to categorize something that they aren't, or maybe even people supporting, something might call it diversity, inclusion, and education, and that's really not what they're being supportive of. So I think we have to be cautious about that to address the elephant in the room, because this is a hot topic that we've dealt with in Albany. I am a little bit concerned with some of the stuff that's come out from the Board of Regents. And as a member of the Education Committee, I'm also on the screening committee for the members of the Board of Regents. So I get to sit there every year. We interview the prospective members. Occasionally, we'll have a member from our own community. At least twice, Karen Lessler, who was the previous school board president for Middle Country, great educator. She was nominated to be a member of the Board of Regents. She did not get that, and we had someone as well from Patchogue. So that's something we're involved with, but I am a little bit concerned, and this has been brought to my attention as well. Last year, there was a draft from the Board of Regents, and this is from the actual New York State Board of Regents. This was later revised a little bit because of the language I'm about to read. And one of the issues that was brought up, it specifically says, and I quote, "The senseless, brutal killing of Black and brown men and women at the hands of law enforcement and the ensuing demands for real and enduring racial justice in the face of this inhumanity." So I think that there's a lot of work that we do need to do, but I was, on behalf of our community, I was a little bit concerned that the Board of Regents specifically said in a document that this is a problem, that men and women of law enforcement are targeting individuals by race and killing them. I don't think that that's an accurate representation. Again, not to make the room too tense, but these are issues that we're talking about. And I do think that they should be discussed in the classroom. I do think that that should be discussed. I think it's a social issues question. But when it comes to speaking about, I have a 3-year-old that's going to be attending Grundy in just a few years, maybe next year, if she gets on the PK. Not saying, anyway, maybe I'll step that one back, but she'd be very excited. Every time I take her to Grundy to the playground, she goes, "Are we voting?" Because it's also a polling place. So anyway, that's another issue about polling places in schools. But where I'm going with this is, I intend to teach my child, and I think many of the people in this community will teach their children to judge someone by the content of their character and not based on how they look. And I think that there, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of buzz going around. I think that we all need to kind of take a breath and take a step back and actually take a look at what is being taught, because I think people would be very happy to know that these things that they might think are being taught are actually not being taught. So please take a look at that. And I'll just end on, because one of the schools in my district, not a Sachem school, but actually a teacher did give out a worksheet that actually on the top of it said, critical race theory. What is it? And it was asking about this. So it was brought to my attention, and parents said, what is this? You say they're not teaching critical race theory. This piece of paper from this kid's teacher says critical race theory. It was a social issues class. So I've had open conversations about, obviously there's a very tense time. And when you're teaching about social issues, obviously you can't ignore that these are social issues. But I think our schools are trying to be careful, because you don't want to yell bomb on an airplane. And I think that it's a very tense time. So I do believe that issue was resolved, and the intention was not what it may have been portrayed on social media, not in the Sachem School District, but nearby. I hope that at least gives my take on it. And I'd be happy to converse with anyone after this, because I really am interested to hear what individually everyone thinks about the topic. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I have no, he said it all.
Okay.
Again, legislators do not have any direct involvement when it comes to school curriculum. I will give you by analogy, it's not the legislator. I have 115 employees, and when it comes to hiring in a civil service capacity, we have every shape, race, color, ability, disability, and we go out of our way, provided that somebody comes forward with the skills and the ability and may even need some assistance or accommodation, but they get the opportunity to go to work. Now, that's not necessarily a corollary with the curriculum, but nevertheless, there is, I guess, equivalency, if you will, between what you see in the school setting and what we all live as one of the largest employers in Suffolk County. So I can assure you that you will not see anything along those lines really in any aspect of county employment whatsoever. And I will share with you that I'm one of the 5 individuals charged or given the authority in county government to be the ability to issue whistleblower protection. And I've done it before when we have individuals who've come forward confronting those types of discriminatory issues regarding either race, gender, or some of the other elements. We have an extremely stringent process. And if there is any effort or attempt any place, it's confronted forcefully and addressed immediately. So that's your corollary on the employment side, but we don't do curriculum.
Thank you. Next question is concerns safety and health. What can our local officials do to help keep vaping products out of the hands of our students?
I don't mind going, sure. So obviously education in schools is a big thing, but it starts at home. Unfortunately, a lot of kids come from a broken home, and it's hard for parents who are working 2 jobs to survive in Suffolk County to be watching every move kids make. But, we've banned vaping now in Suffolk County. So I know I've seen it go down, but I still see kids who are vaping, but that's going to come at a price later down the line. So what I would say is we need to be stronger on the education front, public ad campaigns, and do the things that we do for every other program in Suffolk County, and what we do with our state partners to get the message out there, not to start because it's hard to stop.
On the state side, I believe it was last year's state budget that actually banned flavored vapes. So flavored vapes are banned in the state of New York. So that's a step. Controversial because obviously there's a thin line between regulating what adults can do, but also we know that these things do get in the hands of our children. So that's a concern. But I think that, and the question I think is a good one, and it also broadens out now because we're dealing with the legalization of marijuana. So that's a concern. And we're also dealing with a number of issues at the state level when it comes to funding. So when we're talking about legalization of marijuana, where is the genesis for that? In my mind, it's really in the tax revenue from that. And I think that has a consequence. I think that, casino gambling, expansion of that, there's a proposal to add an additional 1,000 video lottery machines at Jake's 58 in Islandia. And that is to fund the state government. So I do have a concern. I kind of hearken back to what I said initially, that it really does come down to the money. When I was first elected in 2018, our state budget was $176 billion. That's 2018. The budget that's been proposed by the governor now is $218 billion. And the state legislature yesterday proposed a budget, the state assembly, their version of that budget. We have a interesting process that we undertake, proposed $226 billion. So you're talking about from 2018 to present, possibly $50 billion increase in state spending. It's not sustainable. And it's because much of that funding is from federal sources, and a lot of that road repair, much needed. It's a one-time hit. So that is being worked into this. So that is within that extra $50 billion. But I'm very concerned because there are programs in there that we would like to fund continuously, like the expansion of pre-K. And my concern is, will that fall back to that? So when you're talking about vaping, when you're talking about now, again, vaping, limiting the access for children on that end, I think our schools do a good job in the classroom to the extent that they can. But it's a tough one because when the kids are vaping, it's something that some of them are in the classroom, and when the teachers turn around, they take a quick hit. But again, our teachers are doing a good job on that. I think the hall monitors that are outside the bathrooms are I'm hearing good reports of trying to cut that down as well. But it really does start at home. And I think the problem now with legalization of marijuana is going to continue to kind of exacerbate that. I'm hoping it won't, but that's something we're working to get additional educational programs at the state level to see what we can do to combat that as well. And vaping, as we know, is turning out in many ways to be maybe even worse than tobacco use. A lot of the problems that are deriving from that. So some of the things that we're talking about and that I'm thinking about on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, as far as vaping in the communities, it's something that in the past you have cigarette commercials and movies and everything else pushes on that glamorizes tobacco use, and nowadays with vaping, it's something that even though the kids have an idea, or at least we have to push back an idea that it's safer. It's actually, in my opinion, what it's worth, is worse in some ways than tobacco use. And and also it's easier to hide because you don't smell it and see it. It's not so obvious. So I mean, in the town of Islip, we've definitely we prohibit vape stores anywhere near community centers and schools. They're all located in industrial 1 zones, and the same thing with CBDs. And as far as like what Doug was saying with the marijuana, town of Islip was we quickly opted out of having any of those retail stores within the town of Islip, and hopefully it stays that way. Thanks.
Thank you.
As Legislator Piccirillo said, the legislature has restricted areas for sale and vending. Legislator Kennedy is the chair of the Health Committee, and as a matter of fact, she is a member of the Suffolk County Board of Health. And she's talked about already perhaps some of the educational types of programs comparable to tobacco cessation. That has been a very effective program that has been in place for many years, provided with assistance through the state. While I agree with Assemblyman Smith that we have to be extremely mindful of what we add during this period, we're almost like in the eye of the storm. Suffolk County received $500 million over the last 24 months of federal funds, which will dry up in the beginning of 23 as well. However, having effective education for prevention or trying to move youth off of the vaping is certainly something that we should be considering to put forward. And I know legislators been in conversation with her colleagues on doing something along those lines.
Thank you. The next question regards the community overall. Do you support the governor's new budget that includes increasing the housing subsidy for our loved ones with special needs?
It's kind of a state question, but no, I absolutely do. I think that this is something that any family that has a child with special needs, I think, worries on a regular basis about what's going to happen to their loved one when they're no longer here. And I think that that's something that we've continued to try to address when children age out at 21 and don't get the same services that they were used to receiving, whether it be a certain number of hours of care at the home, and just trying to see where we can house. That's definitely a concern. We do have on the books for many years the Patavan Law, which prohibits local municipalities from stopping for example, like a group home for individuals with autism or any type of intellectual disabilities, special needs. So I think that that's something that these organizations that maintain these homes, I think they do a very good job. And often people who live in the community are very surprised that it is often the best maintained house on the block. I know my office is notified along with the town as well, the township or the village that the home is being proposed in. And oftentimes, and so are the neighbors nearby. And I very frequently get calls from neighbors, and they're very concerned. So we will bring in the organization, have them meet and explain what's going on. And I say, look, if you have a bad neighbor, the only thing you can do is you can call the police. If you have a house like this, that is not operating well, that may not look well, and this rarely happens. I've never had a situation where people have come a year later and said that I was wrong. They always say, you know what, you're right. We're pleasantly surprised. You can call the organization that runs it. You can call OPWDD, the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. You can call my office, and we can have it taken care of. You can't do that with a bad neighbor. With a bad neighbor that are fighting or yelling or problems going on, you can't do that. So I do support the expansion. We have to do something. These are our loved ones, and they do need a place to live. So I think that this is something that it's very personally near and dear to my heart. And I don't support changing the Patavan Law because there have been calls to change it. And for the reasons I've explained, I wouldn't support changing that. But we do need additional funding because we need more opportunities, I think. And it's something that, like I said, I think it impacts most families in one way or another. So that's my position on the issue. There's some money in the budget. We're going to need to do more. But again, as I mentioned, money, as you all know, does not grow on trees. So we need to really make, education and things like that a priority and cut back in other areas.
I I can't speak directly to the housing with people with special needs, but I do want to share the town of Islip has something pretty nice that we put together. It's a first of a kind park, specifically designed for people with special needs. It's behind Brookwood Hall. If you're over by Irish Lane, if you're familiar with it over there, it's like a 4-quadrant park. It has one area for each part of the park is designed specifically for one area is a visually and hearing impaired. Another part is for people with on the autism spectrum. Another is for Alzheimer and dementia, and the last part is for seniors. So I just say there's always more we could do. And, people with special needs are always first and foremost. But if you want to look at the park over by Brookwood Hall, it's a nice first stop. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so this one, here's where you get two sides of the coin. Absolutely unequivocally, the legislature supports increased funding. She's very familiar with what the needs are for a placement for special needs in the community. She was a practicing nurse for 30 years. She's done in-hospital care, home care, done care all over the place, and advocates for placement, as a matter of fact. She also did 10 years with Seafield, so she is directly familiar with treatment for particularly those that are addicted and that have dual diagnosis. It's indisputable that it is becoming harder and harder for the agencies to go ahead and recruit and maintain the staff needed to assist folks. In the spirit of full disclosure, I worked for DDI for 2 years in my career. We're blessed with 4 kids and 8 grandkids. So I did a lot of moonlighting in a lot of places. It's a good house, as Doug talked about. We took care of 8 adult males, and they were there primarily because most of them, their parents were getting to be 60, 65, and 70 and could no longer deal with the physical needs sometimes associated with a 6'2" adult male who would on occasion become combative or whatever. The other side of the equation is I'm your comptroller, and I audit homeless housing providers and I audit agencies. And while, as Assemblyman Smith said, 99% of them are pretty good, there's a couple that are real snakes. We've had a couple of million worth of disallowance, not in the long-term OPWDD, but on the homeless housing side. So I would say it's important to advocate for the increased funding, but the concomitant oversight is equally as important as well. There you go.
Thank you. We're talking about funding a lot. Tell me, what is your position on continuing to offer free breakfast and lunch to all students? And if you're in favor of it, how would you propose this gets funded? And forgive me for being naive, but can we get funding at the local level for a program like this?
Well, to get the funding on a local level, that would probably involve raising taxes, which nobody likes to hear. Again, it's through education. So not that I want to keep dumping on you,
It's okay.
Assemblyman Smith, but I think it's a great program and I think it's great that it's available. But whether or not it's sustainable, like Assemblyman Smith was saying, when the federal funding runs out, where else does it come from? So that's the issue, and I'll let the people to my left speak on it.
So I mean, it's vitally important to me that the program continues. And I think we've seen through the pandemic that breakfast or lunch in the schools is the only meal that child may eat for the day. So of all the waste and wasteful spending and borrowing that happens at all levels of government, I think it's imperative that we slice out funding to make sure that these programs are available for kids whose parents are already paying taxes to send them to school. It's almost a double tax, if you ask me. The program should be built in to your property taxes. I'll let Doug speak on how to fund that at the state level, but we're just getting our fiscal house back in order at the county level. I'm glad the comptroller is actually here tonight to speak to that. But pre-COVID, we were bankrupt, the county. If we didn't get the federal funds from both administrations, Trump and Biden, the county would have been bankrupt. We would have to lay off 500 people. We would have to slash services. And it would have been a bleak future for Suffolk County residents, including major tax hikes. We were able to avert that. And through the federal funds, working in a bipartisan way with the comptroller's office, we were able to pay down debt, reorganize debt, and really put ourselves on a better footing moving forward. And I hope with the new majority that we can continue in the right direction instead of falling back to where we were pre-COVID times. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Anthony said, but with respect to the, I've been joking about this now for the last several months because this has now become a realistic item that we've been talking about in Albany. And every year, new proposals come up. This is something that I've long been an advocate for. And I jokingly say that, with the property taxes that you all pay, we should probably offer dinner as well. But at the very least, it's very hard to teach a student that hasn't eaten. That's a very major issue, and if you look at, one of the best ways to indicate if a student's going to be successful, attendance is one of those things. So if that's a reason, that a kid comes here, during the day, I think it's something that we need to provide. We, as has been mentioned, we did receive a significant amount of federal funding. I believe in the city of New York, they have a free breakfast and lunch program. So it's something that I do think should be extended throughout the state. Now, my colleagues in Albany have mentioned, they brought up a very interesting point, though, because the current program we have for free and reduced lunch, we do need parents to apply for. Our community that I represent, so blessed to represent, and many of the school board members here represent, we're very proud people, and the people in this community are not, to the extent that they should be, are not applying for these programs. And the programs are there to help. People are paying taxes, whether it be in their rent or in their mortgage every month, or flat out if they own their home. But this is something that is there to help you. So I do think that this program should be included, because I think as we're even doing calculations for school aid, districts like ours are being undercounted. We have more people that are eligible for these programs that do not apply, and that hurts us for other calculations. So that's a factor as well. I think that it's a program that I would definitely support. Although I will say that I have heard complaints from some of the students and parents from the city that they don't really like the food being served. So I think that's something we could probably negotiate on. I don't know that would be an issue, here in Sachem, but again, that's something that we need to work on. But I do believe that of all the things we fund, I think this is a program that we need to keep and figure out a way to fund it at the state level going forward. And I'll just throw out, I have a bill in there that has really started a ruckus over the last several years about how we fund education. And I've said this at many events, but I have proposed a 1% property tax for the city of New York, because currently in some of the most valuable real estate in the world, they don't have a property tax that specifically funds their schools like we do. We make a significant local contribution, and places like the city of New York are not. So I've put forward a proposal, and every opportunity I have, I bring this up and I ask for support on it. My city colleagues laugh, but I say, well, at the end of the day, you have some real estate. If you go from the Nassau border into Queens, you can have the exact same property, but they might be paying in the Nassau side 11 or 12,000 in property taxes or more, and on the Queens side 3,000. Why is that? I think that's a real concern. We make that significant local investment. I'd like to give my city colleagues, a tool so that they too can make a local investment on their schools. It would specifically go into a New York City education fund. And my hope is that if they have that extra stream where they can fund their schools, it's only 1%, that they can, we can get more of the state aid that you all pay for that goes up to Albany that should be coming back to our schools. I think that's a major issue that we have right now. A lot of money is going to urban schools, not as much to suburban schools, and we're not all wealthy and driving Beamers like they think we are. So that's another issue, but that also goes into how we fund these things, because the free lunch and free breakfast can't just be borne by the local property taxpayers.
Thank you.
And actually, I add to that real quick. What someone Smith said is, when I see our vacation programs, our enrichment programs in the town of Islip, if it's during the summer or during the vacation breaks, we have organizations like Island Harvest that come and they give us the kids breakfast and lunches, and that's something we know is important for them, because they're not coming to school getting those meals, and when they're coming to the programs, they're getting that. So obviously, it's something that they all need. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm going to echo the rest of the panel. I mean, feeding kids is important. We did 4 of them. What I would offer, and this is an interesting thing, and through Assemblyman Smith, I'll offer to the superintendent. So besides all the other things that I do for you, we're the delinquent tax collectors. But we have access to all of the properties that have abatements on them. And any property with an abatement for, in particular, a disabled person who might have children should then be eligible automatically for receipt of, food subsidy or lunch meals. So I'd offer and welcome the opportunity to collaborate with the superintendent if we can identify there are individuals who have that abatement but yet have not made the application. That ought to be almost like an ancillary, a corollary way to go ahead and demonstrate eligibility, for what it's worth.
Yeah, thank you very much. The next question relates to safety and health. How can government at all levels assist with providing enhanced school security?
Enhanced.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to give this to Doug. It's just not something that the county does, but I'm happy to give it off.
Well, something that we've been talking about in Albany that I think would be helpful is if when we get the state aid that comes to the schools, I think that there needs to be a reimbursable state line item for school security, because I think that would encourage school districts to make that investment. I think there should also be a line for mental health, because I think, if you survey school districts, they would tell you if they had extra money, they'd spend it on mental health. And I think the two coincide when we have right now, we've already had a mental health crisis. Now the pandemic has only made it worse. But happy to report now, because the last time we held this forum, we were waiting on $11 million from the Smart Schools Bond Act. And I want to thank everybody in this room who helped out on that. A lot of the people in this room helped circulate petitions that we hand delivered to the governor. I publicly embarrassed the commissioner of education, who's no longer, about specifically for Sachem. And I had her in a hearing and she said, "Oh, if you want, my office can call you and we could." No, I said, "You don't need to do that. I already have the information." And magically, like 2 days later, they were calling a meeting for the state's, the Smart Schools Bond Act money. And Sachem was at the top of the list a few days later, to which, and I was actually at the meeting when they voted on it, because it was in Albany and I was in Albany that day. So that was 11 million that came here. Several million of that was used. Would have been nice if we had it 3 years prior, because we would have had the security vestibules that much sooner. But again, these are issues going forward on education when we're talking about funding for specific programs, and that Smart Schools Bond Act was for computer accessories, also upgrading Wi-Fi networks, and security was a piece of that. I want to make sure with my colleagues that something like that never happens again, because I think that's a terrible way to fund it, where you'd have to wait for the state to approve the funding. It's not reimbursable. So if you spend the money, you're not eligible to now apply for it. But now we do have these school security vestibules, and that's a good start. But we do need increased funding for that. The other thing, right now we have a cap of $35,000 a year for a lot of people that are retired from a retirement system, such as many of our school security guards, retired police. They'll come to our district, and all of them, because they sit here, they work, they know the names of every kid, every adult in the building. They would love to work year round, but because of that $35,000 a year cap, many of them have to leave part of the year and come back next year. I think that's something that we need to really work on. Right now, I'll kind of explain this. There's a cap. So if you retire, so you're not double dipping from a public pension system, that if you come back to work in another public facility, you can only make $35,000, which is up from $30,000 a few years ago. So the problem is that was put in place for people making very large salaries oftentimes. But you've noticed that, people like police officers who live right in our community, we can't take advantage of their services, their training. So that's a problem. I think we need to raise that cap. I don't know the exact figure, but 50 or 60,000 would be at least a good start for that. Even if it was specifically for retired law enforcement, maybe even retired firefighters, something to that effect, that they have that special training for that. So I think those are two issues that we can really do to work on for security. But again, I want to make sure that nothing like this Smart Schools Bond Act debacle happens again.
Thank you.
Again, on this one, I'll reiterate Legislator Kennedy's support for the work that's been done by the Suffolk County Police Department, as does Legislator Piccirillo and Legislator Caracappa, We do have the school resource officers. Obviously, we should have more of them. I go back to the days when we had the DARE program. I was a big fan of it. It was a great presence in the schools where it gave officers an opportunity to interact with children and the parents, kind of in a very, peaceful and placid way. It was not nothing confrontational, and it was good instruction. I do know also that there has been a series of instructions where school districts have been brought in with our police department on a variety of different things, active shooter and things along those lines. She is very much in support of that, as our colleagues are, and would support adding the instructional lines to the police budget specifically for those items to help to broaden the base.
Thank you. Next question relates to the community, and I've tried not to editorialize, but I have to for this question, which is, please, what is being done to address the potholes everywhere?
Okay, this is something I can speak on. I think we'll all have plenty to say, because the thing is, who you contact depends on the road. If it's a town road, you call the town. If it's a county road, you call DPW or you call a legislative office. And sadly, and again, not to dump on the state, but a lot of the really poor conditions of the roads are, say, on roads like Sunrise Highway and 495 LIE.
Well, good news to report after you're done. So
Okay, which is really good. But I want to tell you something specifically that Legislator Caracappa did about that after a personal observation and a near miss accident on the LIE with his daughters in the car. He wrote a letter to the governor, then was Governor Cuomo, urging him to please pay attention to Long Island and the poor conditions of the state roads. And what he did is he got the support of his colleagues. I believe all 18 were on board. And he had a press conference in the state building, in front of the state building in Hauppauge. And the funny thing is right before the press conference started, one of the reporters came up to Legislator Caracappa and said, "Are you aware that Governor Cuomo had a press conference 2 hours earlier saying he was allotting funds, like moving dates that were originally slated for 24, 25. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to be 23, 24, I think." And, on the surface, it might look like he was trying to upstage Legislator Caracappa because he sent this letter. But the truth of the matter is we didn't care. If we get the money, we get the funding, we get the roads fixed, then his mission was accomplished. So because of that action, it did cause the governor to move up some of the dates to address this with the poor conditions. I mean, yes, I've driven on the LIE. I'm sure you all have too. Sometimes you feel like you're putting your life in your hands. But what I wanted to tell you, and I'm sure Assemblyman Smith can elaborate, but I have some flyers here that they have a hotline, 1-800-POTHOLE, the state, and that if you have damage to your car, that you can apply for reimbursement. So I'll leave these here. There's only a few copies, but if anybody wants it, and I'm sure all the electeds here are very aware because potholes are on every road and it's on every level of government.
Thank you.
It's almost amazing that it's 2022 and they gave out a 1-800 number, but
we're getting there.
yeah, I guess government
By
does
2030
move
we'll have
at
a
a slow
website.
pace. Yeah. I have to say, Legislator Caracappa is the chair of the Public Works Committee. I'm on the committee with him as a member, and we do yeoman's work to make sure the county roads are kept above average. And if you ride on a county road and compare that to what's going on the Sunrise Highway or the Long Island Expressway, it's night and day. I mean, I live right off of the LIE service road, and I avoid it at all costs and take back roads to get to work because I don't want to pay for realignment or busted tires or busted rims or a slew of other issues that can happen on the Long Island Expressway, especially in the morning when people aren't awake yet and they don't see a 5-foot deep pothole in front of them and they slam on the brakes right in front of you. There's going to be some issues that happen. I feel bad for the buses too that are carrying kids that are riding on these roads. Serious issue going on there too. But I know this is teed up for the Assembly Smith. This is one of his things, so I'm going to let him have the floor.
So this is something we've been talking about since I think last time we were here. This may have been one of the issues. I don't recall, but with respect to the LIE, we actually would have already had it paved, but for the fact that we had the pandemic, the no road work, as you remember, probably an ideal time to do road work is when no one's on the roads. But obviously, we had to work on social distancing and things like that. So they didn't want to. The Governor Cuomo then at that time did not want to have highway workers out working on the roadways outdoors. But again, there was a concern about that. Now in retrospect, hindsight's 2020 perhaps. But I was very happy to report at that time, I think it was 2020 when we were ready to have the roads paved. There was $55 million in the budget to pave from the Suffolk County border, Suffolk-Nassau border to exit 55 at the time. And then there was a second project to go from 55 to 65. Now that has been moved up and accelerated thanks to the federal funding that we've received. So the infrastructure bill that passed, a great deal of funding from that is coming to the state of New York, and part of that is to accelerate the paving of the Long Island Expressway. That has been moved up to this year. They're going to start as soon as paving starts, which a lot of people will say, well, we noticed the roads aren't being paved till election time. Well, the reality is the roads aren't being paved until the weather's warm enough to pave the roads. So it makes it difficult because you can only really pave the roads when the temperature is above a certain certain degree. So you'll see that as soon as spring breaks, there's now, I think it's 4 different projects that they're going to be doing it at night, which again, for everyone who commuted over the Patchogue-Holbrook Road Bridge, who remembers that was under construction for 4 years, and my predecessor, Al Graff in the Assembly, wanted to put in a resolution to name it the Bridge from Hell because it kept being hit by trucks and road work kept having to be stopped so that insurance could come in and assess the problem. I've never seen, it must be the most unlucky bridge in the world, but it finally was completed after 4 years. I don't think we're going to see that type of action. I think Governor Hochul and our colleagues, and we're very grateful because Legislator Caracappa brought together Republicans, Democrats at that press conference. We were all at that press conference. Very helpful to see everyone come together because I think we all agree that that's a major problem. Now, I will, to bear bad news, because we have legislation that pothole number to fix it is actually not valid during this time because the state will not pay to fix damage on your vehicle between November 15th and April 15th. So if you get damage, hopefully it'll be in a couple weeks. Wait a few weeks to get damage on your car. So that's something that, as a state legislator, I've sponsored legislation with my colleague Tom Abenanti. I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat from Westchester. Senator Alexis Wyke, who represents our community, is supporting the bill in the Senate that we think that the state should stand by its roads all year round, especially when the roads are bad. It's easy to stand by things when the weather is great and you're not getting damage on your vehicle. But again, that's something that I think needs to be addressed. I think we've all had that issue. Sean's sitting in the audience. You've had many, many, many issues. I have to give him a raise to pay all the damage he's had on his vehicle and his car. So, but our townships, thankfully have those programs as well. And I believe they work year round, but they have to be notified that the pothole is there as well. So the local governments get it. The state is getting there. But as I mentioned, happy to report with that additional funding. We should see, again, we're going to have to see how quick it goes, but the bids just came back, and we should be seeing road work start on the LIE at night from the Nassau-Suffolk border all the way to exit 65 in multiple projects. Hopefully this completed hopefully this year, and I'm going to stay on top of that as well. It's become a national embarrassment, the Long Island Expressway. It really has. Even I drive up to Albany every week. The throughway isn't that bad. And there's parts of the throughway that need some work. New York City's not that bad. And there's parts that need work there too. But so I think hopefully we'll have some welcome news. I'm not making any promises, but what I can promise is we will be out there. I've already talked with the contractors that are going to be doing the work and the members of, I think it was Local 138, the operating engineers. They're going to be doing the actual work. They're very excited to get out there and do the work. So I think, I've seen the quality work they do. I think we're in good hands on that.
Thank you.
I can add that Assemblyman Joe DiStefano, I personally did forward emails for press release, and letters were sent to our governor because he feels exactly the same way everyone else does. So I will that's all I could add to it. But yes, everyone is on the same page with this.
Yeah, and just to all the state elected officials, I mean, you'd have to really be out there to not think that this is an issue. So both Republican and Democrat, Assembly, Senate, local legislators, the townships, I know Angie Carpenter and Ed Romaine in the towns, they've been very supportive of getting this fixed. And they've done a significantly better job of taking care of their roads than the state has in recent years. So we're working on that. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, talking to the commissioner of DPW, all the potholes that we know about are filled. It's a high priority, and as they come in, we fill them right away. Just like cleaning the roads for the buses to get to school if there's schools in. But yeah, we're on top of it.
I'm going to echo what the panelists said. I know Legislator Kennedy, I hear it day in and day out, is working with Supervisor Wareheim, Romaine as well regarding the calls that come in. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's, a local town road, county road, or even the state. As a matter of fact, she just got a letter back from DOT acknowledging that they're doing the repair on that button on 347, where somebody must have clocked it. It's that guardrail that compresses, and they were out there today peeling it apart. The 347 extension is starting, as you know. Finally, Senator Matera did a whole lot of, jumping up and down. Anybody that travels 347, you got the Gibbs Pond Road. You got 3 lanes, and all of a sudden, boom, you're down into a, bottleneck with 2 lanes full of, nothing but gravel and pothole. There's roughly 400 miles of county roadway by length and roughly 1,100 miles when you add it for lane miles. We do roughly $5 million a year on the capital project 5155 for paving and reconstruction purposes. There's also culvert and drainage work that goes in there as well. About 10 years ago, when in 08, 09, when we had the downturn, then Presiding Officer Lindsay and the legislature collaborated, and they upped that to 10 million. So the majority may have an opportunity to amend the capital budget this year and to add additional funding. But then, pragmatically speaking, there are only so many asphalt buggies and asphalt preparers and operating engineers to drive the rollers, and the 1298 guys, the laborers, to go ahead and lay the asphalt. So the state will take precedent. The county will come in order to go ahead and try to augment. But we may have the opposite of what we've had before, with essentially no effort to multiple levels of government collaborating to try to now catch up and get work done. But it is inevitable. You'll see the work done.
We all thank you for those efforts. With regards to pandemic relief funds, can you tell us how they are connected to any COVID mandates, if they are?
Well, on the county level, I can tell you that that the state provided our office with a lot of PPE. At the beginning, it was masks. We got sanitizer and bunch of COVID tests, which we still have, by the way. So I would say contact your legislator if you need some COVID home tests, because, there was a couple weeks ago where you couldn't find them anywhere. The stores were sold out. And but we have been having distributions. I know Assemblyman Smith had a distribution. Legislator Piccirillo had a distribution. So did Legislator Caracappa, drive-through style. I know personally we still have some in stock. So if anybody needs them, let us know. So basically, as far as the mandates, when things were required, we complied. Whatever the state gave us, we gave back to our constituents. So that's what we were able to do to help people.
Thank you.
I don't know of any strings directly attached. I know the comptroller, he sees everything that comes through the county, so he'd be ripe to answer this. But we were in the minority at the time when most of this was going on, but I don't recall the governor saying, this strings attached to this money as far as what we received from the state in pandemic relief.
No, I don't believe that there has been. But as I mentioned, I have the number here. During the federal pandemic relief, the state of New York received $3.9 billion for elementary and secondary education. And then the American Rescue Plan last year, $8 billion for elementary and secondary education. But I think if I could just editorialize for a minute, because this has become a very hot topic. And as the ranker on the Education Committee, I'm looking forward to, we're still in the works now. Sean's in my office. He works with me on this. I'm probably going to be holding in the coming months a sound off session for people around Suffolk County to attend, school board style, 3 minutes. The only difference is with that, you'll have state legislators that can engage in those conversations. It's tough because when you come here to speak to the school, there's an added element that people forget because, yes, our superintendent, works for the board. Our staff works for the board, and the board represents the community. But the added level there is, there are certain things that our school boards can't do. They can't set requirements on individual school buildings or school district employees to either comply or not comply with state directives from the Department of Health or the state education department. And I think that has been a really tough point of contention over the last 2 years. So I think our schools have done the best they could with these mandates as they came down. Something in education the last several years that's been used, and I hate it. I hate it when this expression is used when they say we're building the plane in the air. It never ends well when you're building the plane in the air. The Common Core, we were building the plane in the air. That did not end well, and continues. A lot of those elements. So, but that really probably is the most apt description of the COVID period, when we were really dealing with, and I think members of the public that are watching at home, if we all stop and are just honest with ourselves, put aside your political beliefs, we didn't know what we were dealing with. I remember the first day getting called in to a special session with a briefing from the Commissioner of Education on March 3rd of 2020. My cell phone was ringing off the hook. The county executive's office was calling me every single day. We have 2 cases of COVID, one in Farmingville, one in Ronkonkoma. The next day, we have 7 cases of COVID, one over here, one over here. The next day, we have, 20 cases. And finally, I said, look, I really appreciate it, but it's just getting out of control. So I appreciate the call. You don't need to make it every day because you have other things we need to work on. So when we're talking about this, it really goes to decisions that were made with the information that they had. And Andrew Cuomo was the governor at the time. I agreed with him on some things. I disagreed with him on other things. But directives were coming out of Albany that were requiring school districts to do certain things. Now, some people may not actually realize we're actually in another state of emergency still, because of the latest variant of COVID-19 from December. Since December 3rd, we've been under a state of emergency declared by Governor Hochul. There haven't been a tremendous amount of mandates coming from that, but under a state of emergency, which a governor can extend for up to 6 months without legislative approval, the Department of Health can make certain guidelines. So not saying that that's tied specifically to education funding, but what I will say are that when it comes to the issues like mask wearing or the distance that students need to be when they're playing a musical instrument, unfortunately, that's not something that is being controlled at the local level. And as absurd as some of these things may seem, they're not coming from Holbrook, New York, or Lake Ronkonkoma, New York, or Nescasset, or Lake Grove, or Farmingville. They're coming from Albany, from experts in the health department. And I say experts in the health department because I think it's fair to say that when you're looking for policies to be made on public health, you're not necessarily looking at members of the school board or members. I think the public would like people that have health experience to be making health decisions. That's not saying every decision that was made is the right one. So I think to answer the question, these funds not tied with federal, not tied with strings attached. But if our schools were not complying with the directives from the state, there certainly was a concern about school officials possibly being removed by the governor, the possibility of a threat of school aid being in jeopardy. I will tell you that has not happened. And I would, that I don't believe that actually would happen, but I can't say that with authority to say that would not happen. But, our community would certainly fight against that. But this Sachem district has done everything they can to keep every student safe. And, I don't think that's a concern. But to members of the public, I wouldn't worry about the funding being withheld. But just know those decisions were made elsewhere.
Thank you.
The COVID mandates I can speak to the county funding. So we took 257 million in May 26th of 2020. As Legislator Piccirillo explained, we had been in the market for a $40 million short-term note on March 5th. And even with a junk bond rating of BBB, ordinarily we would get money at about 0.8, 1.1. We paid 4% on the money. We got clobbered. We got absolutely excoriated in the market. Congress acted, 257 million sailed into Suffolk County, and basically it got spent on police, health, IT, and some friends. There was no, the way the federal legislation was set out, it was extremely broad as far as how local municipalities could utilize the funding for the purposes of maintaining operations throughout the duration of the year. Subsequent, we received 143 million in May of 21. That was the first tranche from Recovery Act money. And in another, 30 days, 40 days, we're going to get another 143 million. That funding likewise has been relatively broadly structured for use by the local municipalities as to where the commitment goes. Sure, PPE was bought. There were suits, there were masks, there were tests, there were testing sites that were stood up, many, many different things that were done. But from my side, from the bean counter side, there was no specific quid pro quo regarding receipt of the money and how it was utilized tied directly to COVID. It was more of a recognition, as Legislator Piccirillo said, we were pretty close to receivership. We were wrapping change to go ahead and make payroll through the early part of 20 and the latter part of 19. Oh, yes, we are in a different place. We're in a much different place. But that happens when you drop 500 million in somebody's lap. Oh, by the way, this I think might be what the legislator would be saying. But so the reality of it is that, you know, we are emerging out of this. And again, I'll take the page from Assemblyman Smith. There was no, you know, guidebook as far as how to try to function and go forward. Even as we're here still, we're looking at, you know, the remote aspects of even how we work, you know, from an employer side. My grandkids, we have 8 grandkids. I felt very, very badly for them. Remote learning, what is that for, you know, a 7-year-old? They like to play a game on a tablet, not spend the whole damn day supposedly learning off a tablet. So, you know, they're in a better place now. Hopefully, this is just going to be a bad memory behind us, and we'll take lessons from it going forward. But I would expect if we saw a need to go ahead and confront another wave or something, hopefully we're doing it a little better and a little smarter.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on these, you know, the pandemic relief funds as it relates to the district. What can be done to allow Sachem to use these funds when they need them without any expiration date in a similar fashion, you know, say to the Smart School funds? For example, could we use these funds to support access to mental health support services? I know it might be pointed to.
Yeah, I could jump in if you don't mind. Yeah. So one of the issues that we have with that, and there's 2 elements, and I touched on the Smart Schools Bond Act for a few moments ago. I'm a little bit concerned because I don't personally think that any program should be run the way the Smart Schools Bond Act program was run, because what that had school districts doing was to actually propose to the state how they would spend the money. Then the state would have to approve it, and only until the state approves it would money be allowed to be spent. So I don't think that that's the model to use, but we do have an issue because we can only keep a certain percentage of money in reserves for a district. And I think we all remember here in Sachem when we were down to a very, very tight reserve fund just a few years ago. That might have been 15, 16, maybe 14, 15, very tight. Now we're fortunately not in that position at this time. But there is a cap where I believe it's 4%. John O'Keefe, sorry, 4%. Is that the cap? Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot there. So I believe it's 4% that districts can only keep 4% in reserves for general purposes. There's other reserve funds that they can use for other reasons. Other levels of government also have a limit on reserve funds. And it's a tough issue to deal with because, our public institutions like school districts, like townships, villages, are not supposed to be banks for public money. And I don't mean that derogatory in any way because I'm not suggesting that happens or is happening, but that is what the law is set out to do. Is we don't want, and we've had, when the state comptroller has done audits in the past, we have had across the state municipalities that have been, looked at and said, oh man, you have way too much in reserves, townships that have had to return the money to the taxpayers because again, it's good to have a rainy day fund, especially in education when things are so up in the air all the time. Many of our programs are the first to be cut when cuts are made. We remember the gap elimination adjustment. If you don't remember, that was about 10 years ago. Significant reduction in state aid to close a state government budget gap, which if I had a crystal ball, I think we're looking at probably a budget gap for the state in the next 2 or 3 years, just because of the way we're structuring spending today, that this one-shot money we're not entirely using for one-shot expenses. And I'm very concerned. And as I mentioned, I give a lot of credit to our school board members because you have to make tough decisions often. And as your state representative, I'm going to be really looking at it closely for this time next year. Today we're in a budget. And if anyone had watched the assembly proceedings yesterday, we went through Monday, we went through the one house budget proposal. You would have thought Oprah was giving out cars to everyone because every program that you could imagine was being funded. I think it's great. The problem is it's a fantasy document, and the money that we're playing with right now is being borrowed for generations to come. And I think it's something that concerns all of us. And again, when we talk about like the federal infrastructure money, we just talked about potholes. LIE, seriously in need of repair. That's something that needs to be happening. A lot of the money we spend in state funding, there's a constituency for every amount of money. So it's tough to find out where do you actually cut these funds. But that's going to be that may come to roost sooner rather than later because this was a one-time expense and our national debt has exploded to $30 trillion. And I think obviously that's something with inflation on the rise. That's only going to stretch our tax dollars shorter, as expenses go up, as the price of oil goes up, paving the roads becomes more expensive, all of these things. So the original question with respect to pandemic funds, there have been proposals of, editing the tax cap, perhaps, making certain adjustments there, perhaps creating additional temporary rainy day funds. Those are all things that I'm definitely looking at, but we do want to make sure we don't want to overtax in every school district, every municipality. We want to make sure we're not overtaxing residents and we're delivering those services. And that's it's a tough balance. So that's something we're looking at.
Thank you. Next question relating to health and safety. What is your stance on vaccine and mask mandates?
Okay, again, speaking for the legislator, he himself is vaccinated. Okay, and he was not anti-vaccine, but he was anti-vaccine mandate, especially for people who lost their jobs because of personal decisions. But like I said, he himself did get vaccinated and wasn't against it. So
just to point out, I'm not, the question is not, so to be narrowly construed, just to
for
focus,
a personal choice.
just to focus on COVID vaccines, but vaccine mandates in general.
Again, that doesn't really come across our office because usually that involves people being enrolled in children involved, being enrolled in schools. So again, that's something on the state level. So it's not something our office deals with. So once again, sorry, Doug.
You want to say something?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. We've gotten to the point where this has become lunacy. Right now in New York, the Mets of the Yankees the players have to be vaccinated to play home games. But unvaccinated players traveling from other states into New York don't have to be vaccinated to play at Yankee Stadium or Citi Field. There's no science that would suggest that that's the right thing to do. To say that you have to have the government should use force and mandate people to get vaccinated is wrong. In the beginning, we were kind of on an island. People that agreed with this philosophy that I have. I think it's wrong for the government to use force to tell people that they have to be vaccinated. I think as the mask mandates were being lifted all over and children for 2 years were still in masks was wrong. It should have been taken care of by the state. I think the governor really missed an opportunity to show her independence from the federal government. And here we are today. Nothing's changed but the weather, and yet the mask mandate has been lifted. So going forward, I hope that elected officials that are in charge of this state have the courage and the fortitude to protect children in schools from abusive mandates at the executive level without any input from the legislature.
So this is really a two-part question because we're dealing with both COVID and non-COVID vaccines. So I'll go into both. I personally got the COVID vaccine, chose to get it. As soon as I was eligible, I didn't want to jump the line. I'm happy I did get it because I personally know a lot of people who got COVID, some dear friends that are still suffering from that, and some that are no longer with us because they contracted COVID. So I think that's, I also contracted COVID in December, and I was, again, not a doctor, but I play one on TV. No, but not a doctor. But I feel very good about getting the vaccine because my symptoms in December were really mild, very mild. And I feel personally happy that I chose to get the vaccine. From the state level on with respect to the COVID vaccine, as a legislator, my opinion has been very consistent that I believe that I did my job making the COVID vaccine available to every New Yorker at no cost as quickly as possible. There were countries across the world that did not have access to getting a vaccine a year after we have all had the ability to get it. So I do not believe in a mandate. I think we did a good job educating the public and explaining why this is something that they should consider strongly. We saw the numbers of people who chose to get the COVID vaccine very high. It was over 70% before the state mandates came in to compel certain employees and certain individuals. The second part of this question with respect to our children, I have a 3-year-old. My wife and I choose to get our daughter vaccinated. This is no longer a choice that parents have to make anymore in schools because a religious exemption that once existed where a parent could say that they have a truly held religious belief that their child not be vaccinated. They were once able to attend schools under a bill that became law, which I voted against. That was repealed. My reasoning for voting against that, which would allow a religious exemption for the few parents that had serious concerns about their child. I believe in parental rights. And there has been no evidence demonstrated to me, and I did a lot of research in this, that any, this was done in 2019 during the height of the measles concern. In certain areas of the state, Rockland County had a significant outbreak in certain areas about measles. So this has been in the forefront before COVID, that exemption was then repealed. There was no evidence to me that any student holding a religious exemption had ever put any other student at risk. We couldn't find any data that supported that a religious exemption had caused other students risk. So with that information, I could not support a repeal of the religious exemption. That aside, narrowly, the state assembly, the bill, we have 150 members. The bill passed by, I believe it passed by one vote on the floor. That's how close that was. There was a health committee meeting. It passed the health committee by one vote. Now, again, personal feelings aside, my daughter is vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. I did believe that was an important choice. Now, we go to the third part of the question because there had been concerns about would the governor or the state of New York mandate every student get the COVID-19 vaccine. We've seen no mandate thus far. And I am strongly of the opinion that the only way this could be mandated would be by an act of the legislature to add the COVID-19 vaccine to the list of vaccines that are currently required. That's something that I've been saying for several months. I know there was a very big concern that Governor Hochul had publicly stated that this is something that she wanted. And I had come back and said that after speaking to the members of the legislature, there was not enough support. Of 150 assembly members, there are not 76 that would agree to making that permanent. One of the concerns and reasons for that, regardless of feelings about the COVID-19 vaccine, because some people believed that it should be mandated, but would not vote to mandate it at the school level, is because when the religious exemption was repealed, 62,000 students were immediately removed from schools. That was a serious concern. There are areas in the state that we're still marketing and trying to encourage people, if they want it, to get vaccinated, and this would have removed their children from schools. And you're talking about areas of high risk population where, compelling students to show up to school has been a challenge. We've been trying to work on that. Now you're putting one more reason there. A lot of families where English is not the first language, English language learners that are at lower rates of vaccines around the state, their children may not have been interested in getting vaccinated. That would have ejected them from the schools. For that reason, I don't see that becoming law. So, we're going to have to see, where this goes. There have been other proposals to mandate the HPV vaccine to be included to that list. At this time, I don't think that there's enough support for that to happen either. So that was many facets of that question, but I tried to state my opinion. And for every question, and I apologize, I'm not trying to sound like, an infomercial or some kind of, National Geographic special on, education policy. But what I'm trying to do is give my opinion and also the reason why, but also the reality as I understand it and see it. So I don't see that that's going to be mandated as I see it today. That could change. I don't think it will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking on behalf of Assemblyman DeStefano, I know when it was discussed several times, I've witnessed him. He did say that he was pro-choice when it came to the COVID vaccine. Anything else I cannot answer for him.
Thank you.
So let's see. I'm married to a nurse. I'm the son of a nurse. I'm the father of a nurse. I'm the father of a doctor. I'm a backsliding dirt lawyer. I look to the medicine. My wife is vaccinated, Pfizer 1 and 2 and a booster, and we both got the 65 flu shot. As far as the mandate to compel individuals to have it, I don't think that she doesn't think that the science is out there, particularly when it comes to school age level children yet. And this is where the clash has come, if you will. Anybody who asks a politician, what should you do about a shot? You don't go to a politician if your kid has a sore throat or if your kid has whatever. It's the doctor in medicine that's driving where the treatment and the care and the process should go. We should be guided by those who know. Sometimes you don't always get what you want from those that purportedly should know. Some of our health departments have done well. Others, in my personal opinion, deferred to the politicians. That's no good. But I think that what has occurred with the way that the mandates went, and I'm glad to hear, just as an aside, I'm very glad to hear Assemblyman Smith rule out the HPV too, because that was an issue that was running around a couple of years ago, and my own personal opinion is absolutely not. Absolutely not. That should not be part of the conversation. As far as where you go with the mandates for the mask and for the shots, my own personal opinion is unless science makes a compelling case for it for school-age children, that shouldn't be something that's mandated. Choice, absolutely. And a different setting for us as adults. I had an employee that chose to leave because she wouldn't wear a mask. And, I had no choice as an employer but to go ahead and abide by what was in place at that point. And she was a good employee, too. It's a shame. But that's the personal choices that people made going through the process. And that's the situation that we've all been in when it comes to on the other side, as a matter of fact, from the employment perspective. But like I said, I mean, the nurse can speak better on this one than I can.
Okay, thank you.
You're like Marissa Tomei, John.
Next question relating to education. Do you support mandating kindergarten and universal pre-K? If so, do you have a plan to accomplish this? And again, we might go
So
to-
I love whoever asked that question. I love that question because that question is never asked correctly, and that's the correct way to ask it. The question is always, would you mandate pre-K? Well, yes, of course, I support mandating pre-K, but people don't realize kindergarten is not mandated. So there are parts in the state that don't have a mandated kindergarten program. So in theory, we're going to fund pre-K perhaps in parts of the city, and then a student may not have a kindergarten program to go to. So I think that both are important. I think we need to fund it. Catching and helping students early on has shown to be very effective and very helpful. So I absolutely support that. Again, the funding issue, it's something that we continue to look at in Albany. And I really, again, we pay you look at your property tax bill, you know how much you're paying toward education. And look, you moved here for a reason. You started your business here for a reason because Sachem has, and I'm not trying to pander. I chose to live here. I grew up here. But we have a good school, and with a good school comes high property values. So there is a trade-off. You move here because it's the best school. My mom moved here. She bought the smallest house in the district because she felt it was the best school that she could afford for my brother and myself. So for that aspect, I'm looking to see what we can do in Albany to try to direct more of the tax dollars you send up there from other areas to our area to help fund those programs. So absolutely.
Thank you. All right, a more localized question from regarding the community. What is your stance on permitting other internet and TV providers into our towns? We've heard that Optimum is not permitted in the town of Brookhaven.
It's actually Verizon.
I'm sorry.
It's actually
Verizon. I
Verizon.
apologize.
And it's not that it's not permitted. So I don't know if you want me to jump
Yeah.
into this because this is something that is probably one of the top issues when we knock door to door.
Absolutely.
Anthony and I knock on a lot of doors in the community. And this is an issue when Al Graff was our assemblyman that we worked on very closely. So there was a time where FiOS could not break into the town of Brookhaven. Those days are long gone. And all of the elected officials at that time are no longer there for many years for some reason. So yes, one reason or another. So that time has passed, and now we have an issue where to build out the FiOS infrastructure has become very costly to do that, the fiber optic systems. So the company Verizon has not been interested in physically building out that infrastructure. I co-sponsor a bill that Verizon and companies like that across the state receive a lot of state contracts. They receive a lot of state funding and benefits. This would encourage them to build out into areas like Brookhaven and the rest of Long Island. But they're looking toward the 5G technology, which is a little bit different. It wouldn't run to your house. It would run, and I'm not saying whether I support or oppose this. I'm just saying that this is what their business plan is, because this has been an issue. We want to bring FiOS to Brookhaven. We want to see that competition. I'll tell you in a second. After Isaias, I had a confrontation with Verizon and Optimum about that. But right now it's not that they're being kept out. I think at one time they may have been kept out. There may have been a kind of a, deal cut to keep maybe perhaps Cablevision in Brookhaven and competition out. That has not been the case for a long time. So there's been a lot of effort on the part when Democrats ran the town of Brookhaven and Republicans now run the town of Brookhaven or in a majority in the town of Brookhaven to encourage FiOS to come out here. Has not been that successful. Now I'll step ahead because this is a real concern. I live in the town of Islip. I live in Holbrook. I have the option of both. And after Isaias, I'm on the Energy Committee. We had a hearing. It was actually the fastest I've ever seen the government do anything. But about 2 weeks after that storm, people were out of internet for 12 days in our area, many of them. They were and electric for 6, 7, 8 days in our area. So there were public hearings on that. And I had Verizon and Optimum in front of me. And I felt, as someone who represents 1/3 of my district has both options, 2/3 does not. This seems to be that there was a preference for Altice Cablevision to respond quicker to repairing in areas that they had competition versus areas that they did not have competition. And I brought that up, and it infuriated the now representative who was Zooming us from France of Altice USA. And he refuted that that was not the case, though he was not able to provide me with a report that would show otherwise. So this has been something that, in addition to many of the roles that we play, I've been on top of our utilities to try to keep them honest and accountable. I said during that time that I have no loyalty to either company because they clearly don't have a loyalty to their customers. I switch back and forth based on price. 2/3 of my constituents don't have that luxury. So we are working on that. I do think, again, 5G is a separate conversation, but as the technology improves, what the proposal is, instead of running fiber optic to everyone's house or building, it's going to be run along the telephone poles, and you'll have these devices that are kind of similar to a cell tower that would provide both home internet and cable, as well as cell phone coverage. So that's where they're moving. That's why companies like Verizon are not looking to physically build that in. And there's so many more concerns with that from even the employee level. Our great CWA workers that work for Verizon, they want to build out the network, and a fiber optic to your home is a stronger network than a wireless network. But that's the reality is Verizon is not looking to invest that. It's not a, believe me, that was one of the top questions the last several years. We wanted to know, where is the state lottery funding going, and why can't we get FiOS in Brookhaven? So it's not as nefarious as it may seem.
I mean, I'll make it shorter. Tanner Weissel has both, so we're good.
And just to be clear then, Verizon's not prohibited from coming to the town of Brookhaven.
There's no prohibition, and there hasn't been for 20 years. I can't speak to whether there was an official or unofficial prohibition. I haven't been able to dig that up, but we have mounds of documents that we did look at that at one time, but there have been so many pressing issues. But at this moment, in the last 20 years, they've been welcome in with open arms. They haven't decided to make that investment.
Thank you. Regarding education, please tell us where you stand on the New York State mandated 3rd grade to 8th grade ELA and math state assessments, as well as Regents exams. Is that pointed to you?
If anybody wants to go first, I know it is a state policy.
When you call the 1-800 number for the road, you get Doug.
You may. I don't know. Sean, does that? So,
And if I could just
please, yeah,
if I could just add,
please.
and also your position on basing teacher evaluations, also known as APPR, on these exams, if you would.
Great question, and it's a question that I ask to all prospective members of the Board of Regents, and I'm always interested to hear their response. My view on it, I don't think you can use the same type of metric to gauge student performance that you can to gauge the way a teacher is conveying information. It's not the same. It's not the same metric. I think that there are better and other ways to assess teachers. I was very happy to co-sponsor and support disconnecting the teacher evaluations, building and principal evaluations from the high stakes standardized tests. I'm not a fan of the high stakes standardized 3 through 8 tests. I was happy when a few years back we got rid of K through 2 testing. If you remember, there was actually testing for kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. I think that was absolutely outrageous. I think the parents in our community, in the assembly district that I represent, 135,000 residents, we had one of the highest opt-out rates in the entire state. So this is the epicenter of people who are not happy about having their kids graded against tests that they don't get to see. You don't get to see the test questions. You don't get to see the results. So your students are taking a test. Months later, they get a score on it, but that's not being used to inform instruction. I think that's a major flaw. If I'm a teacher in the classroom, I'm giving a test to see if I adequately taught the curriculum. I am happy to see that we've moved away from a lot of these things. It was not a secret, but there were, moneyed interests that in companies that were paying for text. The same companies were doing the textbooks, the teacher certification process, preparing the exams. They were contracted with the state to actually write the curriculum. The state spent $22 million to prepare the modules that our teachers were not required, but recommended to use because they were being tested on those, essentially on those modules, very poorly written, if you remember. And the standards that, were at that time, written not by educators necessarily. So I think there is a place, obviously, and we do have high performing students. And I stress the fact, I think it's good to have the option of a Regents diploma and the option of an advanced Regents diploma, because we do have high performing students and we do have standards in the state of New York. But I think that we also need to have the option of a real local diploma. Right now, we have a local option where the superintendent at any school district can review and sign off on a local option. I think we need to really go back to what works. Seeing a local diploma option, I think, would be important. The Regents exams, we were actually at the Patchogue Medford School District just the other day, and a group of students, they have a class called Generation Citizen, right? I think that's Generation Citizen, and the students proposed, what if we had an option to add to the language, the languages other than English programs, the modern languages, ASL as a Regents level course. I think that's a very cool idea. But again, not as a requirement, but another option that we can offer our kids. So I think we've seen during the pandemic, a lot of these testing requirements have been suspended and the sky hasn't fallen. Our students are still doing well. So not a shock to any of us because they're still getting the same quality instruction, but maybe their teachers are able to focus on giving them material and gauging the instruction to the interest of the student and making them a better child as a whole than just passing an exam that they'll forget some weeks later. So hopefully that articulates my position on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. From all levels of government, can you describe how you provide mental health support services, and in particular, if they get to the school?
Can you clarify what you mean by it getting to the school?
Yeah, how are we getting mental health support services to our students, in particular, but in addition, generally to the community?
I mean, do you want me to take that one just to kick off? I don't know if you want to. Do you want to? Yeah.
It's funny that this question came up. I just had a conversation with the superintendent of, not here, but a couple of board members in other districts that I represent, because I'm looking to partner with Catholic Health Services to have a mental health symposium in all the schools with parents, teachers, and staff, especially coming out of the coronavirus pandemic and other factors. Suicide is up, drug use is up, and these are pressing issues that are on kids' plates that are hard to deal with, and they don't know who to turn to sometimes. So I think a symposium like this, where you can bring in not only their parents and themselves, but staff members who see them sometimes maybe more than their own parents see them, I think it's an important step to bring all these stakeholders together. I look forward to working with the school. I think I emailed the board members as well. And I think it's a positive step into letting children understand that there's always a place to turn before things go sideways. And we've seen teen suicide up precipitously since the pandemic, and it's trending in the wrong direction. And I know everybody cares deeply about that, and we need to step in now before it gets out of hand. So I'll turn it over to the Assemblyman.
So that's great. Actually, I think that's a great program, and I'm sure a lot of people here will attend that. I'll definitely attend that if I'm not in Albany. So I think that's important. I've been supportive of, and it's tough because on the one hand, I'm explaining the concern that I have about future budgets, the state budget, but also our school budgets. But we really do need additional support for mental health professionals. I think we need, especially in suburban communities like this, but really any school throughout the state could benefit in urban or rural communities, having a mental health provider in every school building, if that's possible. Right now it's not possible. We don't have the funding for that. Some districts are able to do that, some are not. And if you speak with school districts, they have consistently said that if they had additional funding, they'd spend it on mental health services. The problem is every time the state of New York gives additional funding, they also give additional requirements on how to spend the funding. So that is making it difficult. So I would like to see, as I mentioned before, the addition of a school aid line for mental health services and generally just additional support. I believe I'd have to get, let's see. We did have some additional funding for some mental health. I'd have to get that more specifically, but it's something that I think is on everyone's mind. The pandemic's really taken a toll, and you know, we see the number of students being rushed up to Stony Brook. I know I've heard anecdotally some stories at the many school districts that, you know, I serve. So, you know, our kids need it. And really, our guidance staff does a phenomenal job, but to help them, because they have a lot on their plate, because they're dealing with a lot of these issues. They're also dealing with educational futures. A lot of students in our community, I was one of these students, the first one in their family to go to college. And I think that's great that we're able to give people an opportunity that their previous generation did not have. So among that, our guidance staff in the many districts that I serve are working to encourage students to stay on the right track, deal with all these social pressures, and we need additional social workers and school psychologists in the buildings. It's just something that needs to happen. I'm hoping that is one thing that I really hope that this pandemic has shown. Mental health services need additional funding. I think that breakfast and lunch, we need to fund that. And you know, there's a whole host of other things that I hope that we take away from this. So that's one of them.
Thank you.
This one, I will add that the legislator agrees, and in fact, she did 8 years on Mather's adolescent psychiatry unit and knows intimately what the issues are when children are being referred over with mental health issues. Not only do we need the mental health staff, a greater number of them throughout the school districts, we also need the beds for adolescents to be admitted to. Unfortunately, there are probably only, what's Stony Brook? Stony Brook's about 50. About 25 beds in all of Suffolk County for a population of 1.5 million in total. Clearly not enough, just as there are not enough inpatient beds for drug detox as well. The same thing that she deals with on a constant basis, trying to work with getting, and oftentimes it's adolescents admitted into a program. So there is a need for the staff in the schools, but there's also a structural need that's broader to accommodate additional beds to address the treatment for the mental health issues.
And if I could just jump in there, because I did find the additional funding. So the governor had proposed, and something I agree with, sorry, John, did I just, an additional 100 million for a grant program for mental health and addressing student well-being. The Assembly, we proposed an additional 40 million on top of that. But again, that a grant program is great, but I'm always concerned about creating a Hunger Games situation where you have different regions competing against each other. And that does happen. You know, we are fortunate. We have great grant writers, and other districts may not have the ability to, you know, have somebody work on that type of thing. So that's between 100 and 140 million to that program, as well as the 40 million for a student mental health. Okay, that's probably this. Yeah, that's the additional 40 million. Yeah, so possibly 140 million statewide for additional grants for that. So we can look to programs like that, but it's going to have to be sustainable, you know, and continued funding to expand that.
Thank you.
I just want to share that, you know, that's a lot of times we talk about prevention for drugs and for even gang violence, whatever it is. Mental health is the first step to combating all of this. And there's, you know, like you say, not enough beds, people calling up all the time, trying to find somewhere to get help. I mean, you know, in the town of Islip, we give free drug testing kits, you know, but that's reacting to the problem that's already there. And prevention is important, and education for parents and kids about not to engage in those substances. But it really starts off with the mental health aspect first, especially time we're talking about COVID, and a lot of kids coming through the past couple of years not seeing their friends and family, and they're isolated at home. You know, from what I see, there's never enough funding for anything we want. But I think the most important thing, you know, from what I see, is if we could get more help with the youth and mental health, we could be proactive to resolve a lot of the problems.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one more question. It might be pointed once again in connection with bullying and specifically cyberbullying, which has, of course, been rising with social media. Do you believe that parents should be held accountable for their child's bullying and cyberbullying conduct? And if so, how would this be accomplished?
I think that anybody who is a parent would feel that they wouldn't want their child to be the bully nor the victim of being bullying, but it should begin at home. As far as them being accountable, do you mean in a legal capacity?
Well, I can't answer that. This is a question from the community. It's a general question.
Gotcha.
But answer it in the alternative if you can.
I mean, I don't know that that's specifically a state-related question. I mean, it's hard for me to speak for the legislator about that. I can only give you my own opinion. So I think I will pass it along.
So I guess there's two sides to this question. The first side is, do the parents know what's going on? If the parents know what's going on, then legally they could probably be held accountable for not stepping in. But as we said during previous questions, we have parents working 2 jobs, not in the home. The kids are coming home. They have access to technology that even myself and Assemblyman Smith didn't have. I didn't have a cell phone growing up. There was no Facebook. I mean, we had TV and beeper. When I got to a certain age, but that was really it. So bullying usually was done, on the basketball court, or you got into a fight and it was over. Now I do see though, and I see this from adults too. This isn't only a child issue. Online, going at each other in a way that's just not good. And I know that kids see that too because they're on these social media platforms. And I think we need to lower the temperature. I understand people get passionate about issues. I've been there myself. I'm guilty of it. But at the end of the day, I think we need to take the temperature down a little bit and learn how to communicate better across the board on issues that affect us as a community. And so it definitely starts at home, like Lauren said. All of this really starts at home.
I agree with a lot of what Legislator Piccirillo said. What I would add is that, this is an issue that every few years comes up. It should be something that we continue to address because it hasn't gone away. It's only gotten worse. As the legislator said, students can't turn this off. This is something that comes home with them. It's 24 hours a day. It's also an addiction to some regard. It's maybe not exactly an addiction, but that self gratification, that immediate gratification of those internet messages. If anyone's seen any of the research or documentaries they've done on that, but 2 thoughts that I have on it, and I've been supportive of including in the definition of harassment in the penal code as also communications by electronic means, because I think harassment, now that we're in the digital age and through the 21st century, that I think that needs to be updated. Unfortunately, in Albany, there's been a very really not a great feeling about increasing penalties on any criminals. And I'll just say that bluntly, there hasn't been an appetite to increase penalties. To that end, I'm also concerned about the proposal, and there's pros and cons, so I won't get into a debate, but the raise the age proposal that had gone through, which raises the age of criminal responsibility from 16 to 18, something that my predecessor in the assembly categorized as the Gang Recruitment Act, because gang members were recruiting at younger ages now, because a 16 or 17-year-old can no longer be charged as an adult if they commit a number of very serious crimes and would automatically be sent to family court rather than being dealt with in a criminal way. There's pros and cons to that. Obviously, I think that could have been implemented in a different way, personally, because I think there were concerns that now have been addressed, but I think we may perhaps have over-addressed it. So issues like this now, you're, a 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old are now, well, not an 18-year-old, but one day shy of your 18th birthday, you can commit a number of offenses and be charged as a child, as a youth offender. I think that's a concern. So I think those are 2 ways to deal with it, but really it goes back to mental health. So we need to address that on the mental health side. But I do think including harassment and perhaps taking another look at the raise the age proposal where, if you cause if you cause psychological damage to a child where they commit suicide, I think that should be really examined and perhaps be considered criminally if you're 17 years old. I think it can be debated. Obviously, it's more complex than a simple sentence, but I do think that that's an issue.
Thank you. Echo that I believe that the parents have a role. 2 weeks ago, my 7-year-old grandson told my daughter he wants a phone. And she said, no. He said, no, Ma, I really want a phone. And she said, no, you're not old enough to have a phone. Parents have a responsibility. Parents have to go ahead and see what's going on with their children's technology. No 10-year-old is spending $250 a month in order to go ahead and have these things. It's being provided by a parent, so a parent has an obligation. Also, contractually, if a 16 or 17-year-old goes out, its age of contractual ability in the state of New York is typically 18. So the vendor, Verizon, can be held accountable for vending a product to a minor without capacity. And there's where a suit has to be brought to sue them into oblivion, as well as go ahead and address what the child is doing with the bullying. That's what the legislator would say. Thank you. Did you have something? Okay. Well, if no one has anything else, it's just approaching 9 o'clock. So I'm telling the truth when I said we'd end at 9 o'clock.
Wow.
I want to thank everyone up on the dais here, as well as everyone in the audience. This was an incredibly successful event, conducted in a respectful manner, and I thank you for your time and your sincere efforts to address these important concerns. Thank you.
Can I ask for one thing? First of all, I want to thank our Board of Ed that's here because they came and they showed. So Laura, Vincent, Rob, and Sabrina. So thank you guys. Also, some more administration I didn't see from before. So Patty Trombetta, Kristen Egan, Erin Hines. I want to thank Phil. Thank you, Phil. And I want to thank everybody at the board. I also want to request a picture. So can we get a picture? All right. So this concludes our Sachem Legislative Forum, my first one. And that's it. Oh.